And hello, loves. We are on season 3 of The Chosen, and I welcome you all back, and I welcome all that are new. And yeah, let's get on into it. Episode 1, starting off, we watch a scene from the past as a Roman officer comes to Matthew Father's house for some penalties behind that are being taken out by pulling him to be locked up. Things are shifted fast when Matthew tells that a mistake was had, which is obviously him covering for his father. This, though, isn't taken as a kind gesture, it is, and instead his father spews how disappointed he is and how much of a disgrace it is that Matthew is not only a tax collector, but his tax collector. This leads him to disown him, and ooh, how much of a gut punch that is, that he says, I have no son. Seriously, that is a low blow, even telling his wife to prepare herself and the house because they'll sit Shiva. And yeah, because in his eyes, his son is dead, and Shiva is the tradition for mourning a loss. It sits with Matthew alone for a moment before shifting to the sermon we left off of on season 2. We flash through, it's the Sermon on the Mount, the one in Matthew's chapters 5 through 7. We see how it affects all the disciples as they each pick out of it what they need most. Once it ends, we see Yusuf as he's wheeling about the sermon. Things definitely curating in him the way they did with Nicodemus. Let's just hope it ends out the same. Him on Jesus' side, not abandoning the option of following. His help against Shmuel seems as though it will, but we'll see. We get the official invite for Judas after, and I have to say, it's always something so different with him. Like, knowing how things end, it's hard to see past his betrayal, yet so easily to. They do well to make him seem as likable and compelling as each and every other character, giving life to the name beyond the one sin we often cling to when reading about him. A valid response, but refreshing to see a different take on the character in person, because he was a real person, and he had, more depth than just betraying Jesus. Even seeing Jesus' interactions with him and how he treats him the way he does the rest of his disciples, it shows even more how he really did. Jesus washed his feet along with the rest and set him off with powers to heal and cast out demons, something this season touches on, but we are getting a little ahead of ourselves. But to make my point, Jesus knew what was to come, but treated Judas as if he saw past the betrayal. Or at least didn't treat him as if it had already happened on day one. It's as if he already forgave him, though I'm not sure if that is the case. Judas' situation was complicated, to say the least, so I don't know if technically he was forgiven, but Jesus always did that in general, and it's impressive, forgiving those who hurt and betrayed him, even if that wasn't the case for Judas. Not saying he wasn't forgiven, but the scripture clearly says that at least there was a punishment for his betrayal, so it makes me want to at least assume that that's the case, but not the case with others. So don't let that make you feel like you did something unforgivable. Peter too betrayed Jesus in a sense. He disowned him 3 times but was forgiven. At the same time, it's as if we can see the slight, I wouldn't say hesitation, but more so knowing when Jesus interacts with Judas, as if it shows more to Jesus that things are progressing closer to the end. He's quiet nature and asking of certain questions, almost like the love and kind nature is still there, but not as, enthusiastic, but just as genuine. It's hard to explain if you don't see it, but if you do watch this, as I always encourage you to, just pay attention. I can't explain just the subtle differences, but you can tell that there is just a subtle difference with his interactions with Judas compared to everybody else. We get a new interesting someone, a woman, Joanna. She wants to show her gratitude to Jesus by giving a gift. She's spoken to John the Baptist, and coming to see Jesus in person healed her in ways she definitely was needing. She takes our boy Andrew to see John, and hopefully it will finally be the thing to help calm our boy. Yusuf in his synagogue, he's wrote down the sermon he heard, and we get a glimpse of another new character, Jairus. And if you haven't heard that name before, let's just say a thread is definitely being placed for a later event. An important one, but he's the new record keeper and offers a deal with Yusuf. He allows Pharisees he works with to place their writing in a safe place before being officially sent off in case they change their mind on it. Yusuf's writing of the sermon being one of those that he needs time to ponder on. It's not something that will do well if it's seen by the wrong people. He could get into trouble, especially if we had someone like Shmuel see it. Our group goes home, each splitting off to their homes and or homes that they will be staying at. Our boy Simon is glad to be back, but frustration grows when two uninvited guests join unannounced, Nathaniel and our other Simon, so his welcome home from Enid has to wait, if you know what I mean. Our boy Matthew is stuck lost as everyone settles in. He gave his house up before he left, so he's not sure where to go. A small talk with Mary, super small. He then makes the choice to take the chance to see his family. We join Joanna and Andrew as they see John. Things aren't that great, but he's stoked to hear of Jesus' sermon. Like, he is taking the breadcrumbs, any bit he can get, which in his situation I can completely understand. Like, when you're in a situation, in a cell, and like literally in a dark place, it's just what he needs to motivate him. He even chokes around and encourages Andrew, and it's so sweet and not uncommon for biblical characters. Like, even Paul would encourage those he wrote to when he was in a cell multiple times himself. So it's very hard to think about yourself being in that situation, but it is not impossible to behave this way, and I just full respects. It just goes to show you that the situation we are in shouldn't define our behavior. It can be hard and, like I said, impossible at times, but we need to look to God to keep ourselves from being hardened by those hard times. Even while I'm writing this, it hits. I've been struggling hard recently, but being reminded of God, His glory, and how much He will pull you through, like filling you with joy and peace when the world tries so hard to smother it, like stay strong and even more cling to God. I've been repeating to myself that some have it harder and it's okay to see the hurt as hurt, but that was only a band-aid. But knowing that God's will and being a follower, asking to be filled when you need it desperately, it helps so much. Just the thought can help align your thoughts better back to God. We get an apology from Andrew to Mary. He realizes how ill he was towards her. His fear took better of him and he wants to reconcile with her. He tells of how he's trying to do better, and it's such a bittersweet thing because Mary tells herself of how she doesn't think anyone has ever actually apologized to her before, and Andrew says how she doesn't deserve that, which is so true. Our girl is so sweet and deserves so much more love than what she has been given. We finish with Matthew as he is at his parents' door. His father opens up and greets him, calling him son, and it has all the feels. Again, ending out on such a beautiful moment to let it linger with us as the credits roll. Episode 2. Getting into it, we are with Atticus and Gaius, and notice how distant Gaius actually is. He seems to have his mind elsewhere. We face a problem of pilgrims coming and camping in the hopes of seeing Jesus, something Quintus won't be so happy about, a problem that does also come into play in more this season. We then shift to night as Nathaniel and Simon Z check out the camp's site for themselves. We take note of someone actually watching Simon. Turns out that it's his old order, and they have come because they weren't so happy about his leaving. So now we have another set of troubles coming against our guys. Let's just hope that maybe if they see Jesus, they might convert like our boy Simon Z did, or, maybe not try to off him at least. It's next with our boy Matthew as we meet right when he saw his parents. Things are a bit awkward at first. Matthew's unsure what to think and begins to apologize, realizing how wrong he was about his past. It's then his parents that begin to apologize. They were at the sermon as well. Even more so, they are so proud of Matthew for following Jesus, and they say how this will redeem their family. A sweet twist, the son they saw as a disgrace, not only do they regret treating him as such, but they see the amazing path he's down when many wouldn't. So it's all good with our boy and his family, even better in ways. Our boy even gets his house back. His father kept the key and gave it back to him, but he doesn't want it. Instead, he gives it to the ministry and stays with his parents, taking up an offer that they gave him. Apparently, there is also a sewer problem. Something I'm only bringing up because, yeah, it plays a repeated role in this season. The sewer line has spilled into the drinking water, so yeah, not a great thing. We find out that Zebedee has started a new business venture. He's trying to start selling olive oil. Another detail that seems small but needs to be mentioned because of the bigger role it plays. He eventually becomes in partner with the women following Jesus as a way to contribute to the ministry, but we'll touch on that when it comes to be. Another try later for Simon to become familiar with his wife. It's funny how he treats Nathaniel and Simon Z. They get loud and he straight up gets onto them as if they were his own kids, and it's so cute and funny, which comes into play in a way of a shadow as he finally, does and mentions to Enid after how he thinks it's actually time for them to start a family of their own. And ooh, such a sweet thing. Next, we are with Simon Z later in the evening as he officially makes his tale before an encounter with Atticus. One not as hostile as you'd expect. He no longer finds Simon as a threat, so instead he talks with him and shows how he's not against him. Not on his side exactly, but not the one he should be wary of. He's the one to inform Simon that it's his old zealot buddies who are after him, and more or less tells him that he needs to figure it out before Rome does it, and it won't end so pleasantly if they do. I really do like our guy Atticus. He's like a very enjoyable character, one I'm rooting for in a way because he's not against Jesus or our guys, just a genuine character, curious about everything and willing to play things in a fun way. Like, he's curious in a different kind of way that a lot of the other ones have been when they've been coming to Jesus. He's just more so reminds me almost like an atheist that tries to disprove God by doing a lot of research, and then it turns around like, oh yeah, no, I couldn't disprove that. Like, that more or less like made me more so realizing like, yeah, I believe in God now because of facts and stuff. Like, I know that's not everyone's case, but you hear that a lot where people will try to do that, and that's kind of where his character reminds me of, where it's like, okay, yeah, there's something going on here. Like, I'm not gonna say like I'm spiritual and want to be a part of this, but there's definitely something here that needs to be looked into. Like, his whole self is just fun, the way he's confident and isn't afraid, and definitely does not back down to people. He's a bit of a bold and sarcastic kind of character, but a mostly good guy, not afraid to play sides for the greater alliance he has. Smart and shows it, but most of all, the skills of a really good spy. It's the next day as everyone is gathering at Simon's and Enid's house. Jesus goes over what's to happen next. He's sending the disciples out 2 by 2 to heal, cast out demons, and spread the word, like I mentioned earlier. This comes as a shock to them all. They aren't sure what to think, even less that they will be doing as Jesus has done. This is when they get the official apostle title. Hearing that Simon will be heading far away, this upsets Enid, but she tries not to let it show. It hurts because she just mentioned how she was feeling lost the last time Simon was gone, and them trying to have a baby, it just seems like everything is being pulled out from under her. Like, our poor girl. It's something that she knows can be okay after a moment, something we all usually have to learn how to handle when God sends us through something hard and or unexpected. But he'll still be with us and help us through. It doesn't mean our feelings aren't valid or worth having. It just means taking them to him is what we should do. It doesn't help that Simon will be in direct fire the way Jesus has been, and that they could go days without food because Jesus wants them to go without any extra food or any kind of extra supplies with them. He just wants them to solely rely on God while on this mission to live off of the kindness alone of those who they preach to. So our girl's worry is strong, but let's hope she handles it better than most of the others have been before this. Simon tries to comfort her about this, and she's quick to tell him that she just needs time. Our boy Thomas finally takes a big step and asks Jesus if he's okay if he asks Rama's hand in marriage, not realizing that Jesus actually sent him in the exact direction he'd be heading for Rama's father's permission. So mission engagement is underway, even more so when our girl heads to her father as well, because she is all for wanting this to be successful. So our ship sails, hopefully. Now her father will be the one sending it, because he's the only thing at this point holding it back. And finally, our boy little James comes to Jesus about his problem. It took the mission to finally push him into it. He's confused because he has a hard time grasping that he would be able to heal. It doesn't make sense to him that someone who's impaired could actually heal, something that makes sense to be confused about, something I sometimes find myself wondering and thinking hard about, as I'm sure so many others as well in other contexts do. Having a problem of your own, but being called to preach a message and even healing others in ways while still having your own struggles, like giving help to others when you need help, saying words that sometimes are hard for you to believe, but also ones you so much need to hear. It can make you feel like a fraud at times in some ways, like you say and act like you have things figured out, but there are parts of you that are so messy and don't seem like they make sense for someone who is following God and giving the message he's calling you to give. Jesus speaks words we all need to hear in the grander way. Little James' message will be heard so much louder. The fact that he's suffering the way he is and yet still believes, that he still has faith, that there is a purpose behind what he's going through. It doesn't stop James from breaking down, though, which we all will at times when talking to God and Jesus. Our issues, our problems, mental, physical, financial, whatever it may be, they can be things to strengthen our faith and the message of God. Having problems and storms constantly overcoming you, yet still holding strong to God, it can show others the true glory God is, because why would you hold onto someone if there wasn't more behind them? Why keep worshiping a God that isn't granting all your desires? It can make people want to know more, want to get to know Him themselves. Healing is so much more than what is seen, and that in itself is something we need to remember. Many times we can be healed by our spirit and soul far more than our physical selves, but it doesn't make the healing any less valuable because it's not seen. If anything, it makes it more. A body only lasts in this lifetime, but a soul is the thing that you take with you beyond now. It's that's more valuable. A quick reunion between Gaius and Matthew. It's so sweet before our disciples gather one last time before they part for their journey. Just them, not Jesus, as they talk over a bit of the fear that they have and encourage each other before a psalm is prayed among them. It's a sweet end to this episode. Episode 3. This episode we follow Jesus as he returns to his hometown for a holiday. Rosh Hashanah, I hope I am saying that right. It's Jewish New Year, more specifically the one celebrating the start of creation instead of the start of a new year. We are with him as he comes the night prior to visit his Ima. He asks about a box he came for, which comes into play more later. She's not so much willing or wanting him to leave with it, as she knows it means that it will be his last time home, something he himself says is the case. We find out later that the box holds a bit and bridle that was passed down through the family on the male side. Joseph gave it to him when he was a kid to pass down the legacy and show that he saw Jesus as his son, even if he wasn't biologically his, which is something so sweet. The next day is the festival, and we see Dinah and Rafi before we get our first introduction to Lazarus and his sisters Mary and Martha. They are childhood friends to Jesus in this interpretation. We get an instant idea that Lazarus is definitely the friend that got him and Jesus into trouble quite often. Lazarus is also the one who ends up bringing up the idea to their old rabbi for Jesus to do the reading later. He definitely hypes up his boy about being a rabbi of his own with lack of schooling something that wasn't really done. It's later that evening when Jesus does read before everyone that the trouble really starts. This is reflective of the biblical story in Luke 4. It's not the reading that in itself from Isaiah 61 that sets people off, but Jesus leaving it and showing clearly that he is claiming this prophecy for himself, that he is the Messiah. That's what arises chaos on top of the rumors that have already been simmering about Jesus claiming to be the Messiah. I really do love Lazarus' sister Mary's expression through this whole background scene. Like, she's just in awe and excitement, and you can read it on her face how much she's falling at Jesus' words. I love it. Like, it reflects how later she stays at his feet listening when he visits her home, like how she pours perfume on him before he's crucified. I love the subtle details. Like, you expect to watch Lazarus, so his expression makes sense to be paying attention to, but it just puts it further to have others you wouldn't necessarily think you'd need to watch still showing accurate expressions true to how they would behave during this. Like, I'm sure she's not the only one doing this in the background, like portraying her character accurately to what they would be doing in the background instead of just being like mostly blank or just mostly like neutral. I'm sure if you paid attention to other characters, which I did notice a couple characters the same as far as in showing true to their character, she's just the one that I hooked onto and wanted to express more about. It blows up even more, the whole situation, when he verbally claims it to be true that he is the Messiah. Everyone pulls him to a cliff on the edge of the town to stone him, something that was required for blasphemy, which if this wasn't true about Jesus, like if he wasn't the Messiah and he was claiming to be the Messiah, would qualify. But of course, it's not Jesus' time, so he walks through the crowd with no pushback. This is the very reason he knew that this would be his last time. Let's just say he burned the last bridge back home. I can't imagine how scary this would be, yet relieving once Jesus was out of the situation. Knowing something isn't going to happen helps, but I feel like this is still that in the moment. I don't want to say worry or fear in the sense that you don't believe you'll be pulled to safety, but I can't think of the right word to express this. Maybe dread, pain, grief, stress, just the adrenaline that in that moment as it plays out that your body would be feeling. Like, I feel like your body would feel a certain way, kind of like how Jesus was in the garden before being crucified. He wasn't afraid to be exact, but grieved. He knew how it would end, how he would be resurrected, but that didn't stop everything that was going to happen to him and in that in between. I just feel like in this moment you can know something's going to end that way, be 100% certain, but it still would be something that would be at least intense in the scene or in the moment, and this would be crazy to go through. He then finds his way to his father's tomb where Mother Mary meets him along with Lazarus. He's stoked about everything. Like, our boy is just like fully on board. So many would with this, but along with that, of course, would come the lashback from many others. Episode 4. This one is the last one for this part. And this one is actually a two-parter, this being part 1 of episode 5. So when you get the part 2 of this episode, you will get part 2 of the review. I just thought that was funny how that ended up. We are right with the disciples as they are out healing, casting out demons, and ministering as we see glimpses of each pair through their time. It's amazing. Like, seriously, Philip and Andrew, though, end up getting kicked out of the place they were ministering at. Some leaders weren't so happy with what was being shared and how it was changing things. After we are with them as they return home at the synagogue, and we see a bit of strife between our brothers James and John. Their father takes note of it too, but he takes note more of the fact of how respectful their behavior is compared to how they usually fidget in the synagogue, which, hey, I completely understand. Sometimes it's hard just to sit still even if you want to be respectful. I guess going out, though, the way they did would give you more cause of being a calm self and want to listen to the Bible more than before, even if it is a boring part, as their father explains. We are shown more issues with the cisterns. still issues with the water as a tunnel has ruptured and causing bathwater to merge with clean water. I'm assuming again, as it has been some time since our boys have been gone, or maybe this is just another one breaking down. I'm not sure, but the water sources are dwindling. We join back with the plot of Jairus and Yusuf. Yusuf goes for supplies to send a letter for fixing the cistern before the conversation varies into Jairus telling him about Shmuel's little side plot. He then gives him advice to stay hushed about his own report and even says that he read it. Jairus, though, is excited about Jesus and believes that he could be the Messiah. He believes in Jesus and his ministry. He even went back into everything in the Torah about becoming Messiah to align what Jesus has been doing. This, though, is also a reason why he's so weary about things. He understands all too well that the fire that will arise against Jesus from the Sanhedrin. Simon comes home, and it's not the same as last time. He's exhausted and just wants to take a nap before the guys come later. They are wanting to gather to reconnect. Something, though, seems off with Enid, but time apart could do that to you if you want your husband all to yourself and aren't able to have this idea granted into reality. But she also tries her best to show love to her man. Though this can be a problem if you're not careful, putting other needs in front of yours without communicating your hurt or your needs. You smother yourself and either lose yourself or eventually spill over when everything becomes too much. You should care for others. You also need to be sure not to neglect yourself and even more communicate with your spouse. Like, if anything, your spouse is the number one person you should be communicating your needs and your desires with. Enid does make a new friend. Veronica, a woman cleaning clothes, offers to show her a new spot for water. That way she won't have to wait for hours in line for the only cistern left. Back with Jairus, he's come home from some things before his daughter shows signs of being ill. She's in intense pain before he rushes off to get the doctor. We see a bit of strife between Mary and Tamar before Zebedee comes over for a taste test of his new batch of oil. It's not so great, so they go on an adventure to find better olives. His technique is good, so it only leaves the olives to not be right. This is where the idea to use Zebedee's business to help with the ministry comes into play. The disciples gather, they go over how things went. Our boy Simon, though, is distant because he notices something off with Enid, but she keeps insisting that she's fine. Seriously, girl, you cannot keep pushing things down. It will not end well. More comes up for Big James as he tells his discomfort for how they were ministering, how they would say things, but words he didn't even comprehend or live by. He felt like a fraud. I can completely understand this, but the important thing is if you believe them. You can learn the words given and learn to implement them, like saying you need to be slow to anger. It's something you have to practice. Like reading the Bible and believing it to be true, but not fully understanding it. God will give you the wisdom you need and time. You just have to want it and try your part of being in the Word. Like I said, the important thing is not that if you are fully comprehending, but if you believe, okay, this is God's Word, I might not understand it now, but I know that it is true and that I need to do my part of figuring this out, going to God and getting him to help me. Andrew too takes note of something being off with Enid, and it's such a sweet thing because you can see how he cares for her and Simon. Our new friend Veronica begins to show odd signs. Some of her clothes she's washing are soaked with blood, and we find out that she's actually been bleeding for 12 years. And no doctor has been able to help her, but she still has one last hope. And geez Louise, I can see how girl would be on her last bit of hope there. 12 years of non-stop bleeding from your stuff? Yeah, that would be exhausting. Enid gives even more sign that she has something against Simon, something she is suppressing. Jairus talks to Yusuf again, and now he's wondering if he's being punished for believing in Jesus, if that's why his daughter became ill, something we many times can feel when hard times hit for seemingly no reason beyond them coming. When you do all you should but are put in the midst of a storm, you can wonder if maybe you did do something to evoke it. You have to be careful to take these worries to God, to ask him and to listen to his word. Sometimes bad things happen because we did do something. Sometimes they just come because of life, and sometimes they even happen to show God's glory. You have to learn how to discern the difference and not hold guilt or anger that's unfounded, unneeded. Simon tries again to talk to Enid about what's wrong. She does pull the whole "you should know" card, which I can get it hurts when your significant other doesn't see your suffering and know why, but putting them out like this, it isn't going to solve anything. Like, it's just going to stress everything worse. I mean, I could kind of understand if this is a constant thing to where your partner is constantly just being neglectful and you say something and they just don't hear you and that's how they should know, or that there's differences, but even then you need to figure it out, because you shouldn't be in a situation to where it's just like that. It's just not it's not going to do anybody good. And things do end up getting worse. This comes into play quick when Jesus comes, causing a crowd of people trying to get to him and surrounding Simon's house, and this makes him blow. He's frustrated because of obvious reasons and takes it out on the group for making him feel like the ministry is causing his wife to feel worse. He walks out and bumps into an old friend, Matthew's old friend Gaius. They begin to talk, and Simon vents a bit before Gaius gives him advice about Enid and tells him how saying "you're right, I'm sorry" are the best words to ever get him out of issues with his wife. That couldn't go wrong. Even with how he kind of already did so to no avail, but hey, maybe it'll work the second time around. Gaius does come up with a project to keep our boy busy. They both sign up to fix the cistern, which, one less problem could help things out. Maybe a bit of bonding could help too. But back to Jairus and his family. Things have grown worse with his daughter, and that's all we get for now. It definitely does end on a cliffhanger with this season 4 episode cutoff. But yeah, hey, what could be nicer? But yes, that is it for this review. And like I said, this is part 1, so I would appreciate if you all come back around in a couple weeks for part 2. But that is it for now, and I appreciate all the loves and all the support, and yeah, that is it. Please like, subscribe, but I pray blessings upon you all. Goodbye.